All right, in this episode, we talk about the timing of force production coming out of the back leg drive
and the difference between speed and power pitching.
All right, Brent Porcio, Stephen Godani here at the @TopVelocity hashtag Pitch and Tips show, where you go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and @TopVelocity hashtag Pitch and Tips. You ask your question on anything we do here at Top Velocity or anything on pitching, and we're going to answer it on the show. Having a really good show so far, so if you haven't already, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I got it on iTunes as well as a podcast, of course, Facebook, Twitter. Subscribe, follow us, and check out what's going on with our latest show. And keep your questions coming, and we'll keep this all going and having a good time with it. All right, what's the question for today? Cass Kreitlow asks, is there significance in keeping your back foot connected to the ground through pitch release? All right, good question, Cass. Cass always has good questions for us. Cass has been through camp, coaches it now, and has a really good understanding of the approach. And what he's going at is talking about in the back leg drives. Is there a purpose of keeping the foot on the rubber as you go into your front foot, or actually trying to get off the rubber? And it makes a good question, because you're going to see guys at the upper level, at the major league level, will do both. You'll see Chapman get a foot off the rubber. You'll see someone like that I've liked is almost a prototypical extreme 3X driver. Brandon Morrow will get like 2 feet off the rubber. You'll see Caps get 2 feet off the rubber. You'll see Jordan Walden, other guys that could be extreme 3X guys get really far off the rubber. But then you'll see a guy who's a 3X guy like Sonny Gray, not on the rubber, but closer to the rubber. You'll see guys like Jason Mott, pretty much on the rubber or close to the rubber. What's going on between these two guys is, of course, the guys that get farther off the rubber are generating force a little bit earlier. So their timing of their back leg drive is earlier. The guys that are closer to the rubber, Steven Strasburg is another one, timing their 3X drives a little later. Now, if these are 3X guys doing this, it's just the timing of when they initiate the drive. If you're a rotational guy, you're just rotating your back leg, you're stuck on the rubber, okay? Knee slammers, stuck on the rubber. Really, the guys that are getting off the rubber are 3X guys. But why should a guy be on the rubber? Something we talked about the other day. This kind of gets complicated, where speed guys that are just really fast guys but don't carry a lot of mass, typically lean guys, they are going to try to get as much energy going as quick as they can, and they typically, they don't feel that they have to be late with their timing. So they can be a little bit early with their timing and just focus on how fast they can go and then how much they can convert that up the chain. You know, Tim Lincecum in his day is a good example of that. He gets really far off the rubber, goes a little bit early with the back leg drive, incredible speed, incredible torque, separation, and converts it really well. But if you look at someone like, Jason Mott back in the day, I'll use an example, who still just barely gets the back leg drive through, but he's still on that rubber because he's late. It's like he's hitting, and the moment he's hitting, the back leg drive is coming through. That is going to support guys with thicker mass that don't really have crazy speeds, but they still got what's called power. So a more powerful guy is going to stay connected to the ground longer. So the longer I stay connected to the ground and the later I generate my force, the more the force that I get off the ground is going to get into my body. If I do that too early, I'm not going to feel that force, but if I have a ton of speed, it doesn't matter, okay? So guys that need to be connected more to the rubber into their 3X drives, those are guys that need that power. Say two things, they're either big, thick guys or they're short and thick guys. It's really gonna be related to the guy who has a hard time getting a lot of mobility. So they have high tension in their muscles. So they have to stay connected to the ground longer to make sure the force being generated on the ground is getting into their body more and helping stretch those tight, high tension loaded tendons, which is going to be also very effective in throwing hard. So if you're a guy who doesn't have a lot of tension in you, but a lot of speed and mobility, you're going to be a guy who's just going to want to try to get the leg through and get as much speed coming off the rubber as you can. You don't have to stay as connected. So in this question, Cass, the reason a guy is going to stay on that rubber longer, still trying to triple extend though, is because he's trying to stay more connected to the force production coming out of the ground, so he can get that into the body to really work with his stockier, thicker frame as well. Now, if you're completely out of this approach and your foot is stuck on the rubber like it never did anything, then that's a problem. I'm not talking about those guys. In this approach, you have to generate force off the rubber. You never want to land with a dead leg or a dead weight. It's going to kill hip rotation. You'll never have any hip rotation if your back leg is a dead weight stuck into that rubber. That's not what we're talking about. In this approach, we're talking about guys that as they're extending, their foots are still connected to that rubber. That's just a late driver of triple extension. And that's a guy who needs more power than speed, because he's probably a thicker guy to try to manipulate, twist, and torque his body to generate high ball speed. What do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I would just say it's a particularly well-timed question just because of yesterday. I still kind of have some of the stuff like fresh in my mind when we were working on it. We were talking about how like the guys who just have like a ton of speed, like Brent's saying, it's like that can kind of create like Tim Lincecum we were using as the example, like how he can get so far off the rubber. But Brent was saying I wouldn't really consider him like a power pitcher. Like you were saying, the power guys are more rooted into the ground, staying with the ground contact time more, and then creating more power. And I never really thought of it that way because Tim Lincecum is such like a freak of an athlete that everybody like even said like when he was throwing hard, I never really made the connection. Like in spring training, they were like he was like the fastest guy in camp when he was throwing like 100. And I never really made the connection that it was like, okay, like he's just like a freakishly fast guy and he can use that to create his velocity. And I would kind of, I'm like a smaller guy, so I would kind of model myself after Tim Lincecum. But then now that I'm kind of learning more about it, I'm kind of realizing, hey, I'm not that freakishly fast, athletic type of guy. So it's like maybe instead of trying to move as fast, that's not what it is. Maybe like Brent's saying, like you have to have more time in the ground creating the power, and that's like where this approach really goes for. And I think a lot of guys just don't have that like freakishly fast athlete type, but the one thing that you can do is just keep building power and then learning to keep it in the ground more to create the velocity. So I think that's awesome.
That's a great point. And I think we can go to Tim Lincecum. We can talk right now. Why has Tim Lincecum lost all of his velocity? It's because if you're a speed guy and you're a guy who's getting off the rubber and you're incredibly fast and you have great mobility like he had, what happens as you age? What's the one component that we lose the most of?
Speed.
The quickest and the most of is speed. It goes the fastest out of our body as we age. So that's what we saw Tim Lincecum. As he aged, the speed left his body and he just tanked in velocity. So what he should do is like what Steven should do, is he should now build for a little bit more mass into his frame and time his movements a little later to get more force production into his body, right? And not just strictly rely on, I'm gonna move quick, it doesn't matter how late it is coming out of the ground where the force is, I'm just gonna move as quick and I'm gonna torque it out and that's all I need. Well, when you lose that, or you never had that, and you wanna be that high velocity guy, then you gotta bring in some mass and bring in some force production and use that force production against that mass to torque that mass. And that's really what I've kind of coined is the difference between a speed pitcher and a power pitcher. The speed pitcher is that guy who's just incredibly fast and that's all he needs. The power pitcher is that guy who doesn't really have the speed and he uses his mass and strength more with what speed he has to generate the force into the ground and to really get the ball speed out of his body. So that was a really good question. If you have a question, go to Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and at TopVelocity hashtag pitch tips, ask your question, and we're going to answer it on the next show. So.
Boys, yeah. Holla, 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 we them boys.